Mike Flanagan is my all-time favorite filmmaker. I've seen everything he's done from Absentia to The Fall of House of Usher, and it's surprising that I've only ever made one video dedicated specifically to one of his projects, which was the one about Hush, which funnily enough is one of my least favorite Mike Flanagan projects. Horror, as a genre, is used to reflect on some of the deepest fears of the human condition, and Mike Flanagan usually uses it to end on a positive and hopeful note about the value of life despite the absurdity and pointlessness of it, which is something I've talked about loving before in a previous video. The Life of Chuck is a movie about death, and a movie about living. You can see the through line from some of his other works in this. I find the most similar thing to compare to Life of Chuck is The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is coincidentally my favorite Mike Flanagan project. That show has a lot to say about one's identity and how that identity and someone's life can be stripped away little by little, erasing who they are until they die. The show makes a point of that, relating to Owen's mother who has Alzheimer's, and compares it to the mechanics of the ghosts, who slowly lose themselves, their memories, and are left with only a basic instinctual drive to do something you did when living, but can't remember why you do it anymore. The show uses that to talk about the nature of death, of how someone can live and be forgotten, but that their impact lasts forever, even if they're not remembered. They mattered. Bly Manor also talks about appreciating the time you have, as life is fleeting, but what matters is being happy. It's caring about people, because that's how you'll be remembered. You become stories, but stories are how we keep our loved ones alive. Life of Chuck similarly talks about that fleeting nature of life. The film makes a big point about Chuck being taken way too young, dead from brain cancer at 39 years old, and uses that to talk about the despair that comes from death, especially an unexpected death at such a young age, similar to Bly Manor. The first part of Life of Chuck, called Act 3 Thanks Chuck, as the story is told backwards, shows regular people living on the last days of the universe's existence, as the world has been slowly destroyed by natural disasters and everyone on Earth has resigned themselves to accepting the end is near. The end of that first part, as the universe ends, is probably some of the most scared I've felt watching a film in a while, though that's a personal thing with me. I've always had a difficult relationship with accepting death and the finality of things, especially as someone who grew up religious and was told hell was a possibility after death. It's something I've struggled with since I was a kid. The idea of death terrifies me, the idea of not being anymore, what that would be like. Some people find comfort in the idea that there's an afterlife, but seeing something like that scene in Life of Chuck was terrifying to me, because if the universe ends like that, just a blink and it all goes black, there can be nothing after. It's done. That's it. As a choice for the film, I think it works perfectly to start with that despair, to show everyone on Earth has accepted their deaths and are waiting for it to be realized. On a micro level, that is just what life is for humans, as we are the only beings with the knowledge and certainty that we will die. So we wait, and it could take 90 years or it could happen tomorrow, but we will all die. But seeing the ending coming closer and closer causes a level of despair that is extremely uncomfortable and drives many people into depression.
The waiting, I think that's the hardest part.
On a macro level, the movie speaks to our very current fear that we're nearing the end of the world, as we have entered late-stage capitalism and see companies and billionaires pillage and destroy the world for the sake of profit.
We treated our mother, yes, she's our mother, all of us, very badly.
With America especially currently entering an era of fascism that terrifies anyone who lives there and everyone looking at it from the outside like me. The dread of the end of the world being so close adds a layer of nihilism to some of the characters in the film. One change Mike Flanagan made compared to the Stephen King short story he's adapting, that I absolutely love, is that when Marty talks to Felicia on the phone in the original story, Felicia says she loves Marty, who says it back. Felicia is Marty's ex-wife, who he has sort of gotten back together with in search for some comfort as the apocalypse approached. In the movie, that exchange isn't present. Instead, Marty's only time saying he loves Felicia is when the universe is about to end, and he gets cut off.
I love you.
That sort of change adds to the pessimism and nihilism present at the first part of the film. It's not the sort of thing these two exes would say to each other, especially casually. But, as the end of the world becomes inevitable, certain, and impending, The fear of never being able to say it, of never feeling love or feeling loved ever again, drives Marty to say it, in this desperate plea to stay alive, to feel that his life meant something, more than just being erased like that. The same is exemplified by how Felicia, in that phone call, knows Marty is going to drink alcohol and tells him to lay off the hard stuff, to stick to beer, as he's grabbing himself a bottle of whiskey. In the short story, he listens to her and drinks beer. In the movie, he says he'll listen to her, but does actually go on to drink the whiskey. The movie version shows that dread better, that feeling of pointlessness. Why should he disagree with Felicia? Having an argument with your ex-wife doesn't matter, as the world is ending. And why should he listen to her? The world is ending. Who cares if he drinks more than he should? That underlying dread of the first part of the film is necessary for the point it's making, but especially as a way for Mike to utilize his strengths as a horror filmmaker, even though I wouldn't qualify this as a horror movie, by talking about the horror of humanity's most fundamental fear, our demise. We see the end of the universe first, because we, as humans, have a tendency to look ahead, to want to skip to the end, which is where our fear of death comes from. The fear that life will end, keeping us from enjoying life while it remains. That's why the ending of the movie works so well. Chuck doesn't want to accept that he will die young, not because it's sad or unfair or scary, but because it's irrelevant. Everyone, while they live, has a right to be wonderful, and they should live life to the fullest, because that is what life is. Another big change that made the film infinitely better than the original story is the addition of the cosmic calendar scene, a scene that is entirely absent from the book, where Marty explains to Felicia the concept of the cosmic calendar, how life as we know it, human history, has all happened on the last few days of the calendar. It shows how the universe is much bigger than humans think, than humans are. It's meant to bring some comfort, that the end times might be the end for them, but everything keeps moving. That it isn't entirely hopeless, that things live on as the universe lives on, which is why I mentioned Bly Manor earlier. The short story has Doug, Chuck's brother-in-law, talking to Chuck's son, Brian, with the following passage.
I think when a man or woman dies, a whole world falls to ruin. The world that person knew and believed in. Think of that, kiddo. Billions of people on Earth, and each of those billions with a world inside. The Earth their minds have conceived. And now my dad's world is dying? But not ours, Doug says, and gives his nephew another squeeze. Ours will go on a little while longer.
That exchange is entirely absent from the movie. Instead of saying that these worlds within people's minds are erased, the film just shows it, with the first part, with Act 3, and it showcases the point that, as the world ends, as lives end, others go on. They carry on with the impact of the people that have passed on.
Who knows how long that'll last? Maybe seconds, maybe eons.
I think it works a lot better as it's showing, not telling, and it ties in with the characterization of Marty Anderson, of him trying to reassure people, to always be the grounding force in situations where people are losing themselves, making his character have more depth than in the book. Mike Flanagan has a very interesting relationship with religion, and it's explored best in Midnight Mass, a show largely about religion and religious trauma. In that show, in episode 4, there's this brilliant scene between Erin and Riley, after Erin has a miscarriage, that talks about the afterlife. Like I mentioned before, I have a big problem with fear of death, so this scene is always hard for me to watch, as fantastic as I think it is. But the reason I mention it is because it speaks to how Mike sees death. Riley sees death as the end, as returning to Earth and stopping being, with one last beautiful dream that your brain gives you as it soothes you into oblivion. Erin, in this episode, has a different view, especially since she's Christian, and talks about her baby who died before she could even be born, existing in heaven as her best self, as who she would have been on her best day, and how the heaven she imagines is just living with the ones you love. It's just feeling loved. However, in the finale of the show, Erin's understanding of death changes. She talks about heaven not just as this other plane of existence, but as this concept that you are part of the universe, that you are the universe, that it's all electrons and so we're all borrowed energy that gains personality for a while and then returns to its natural state of just existing. Heaven is being a part of this wonderful universe, contributing to its beauty. I think that works very well with the idea in Life of Chuck that things carry on after you're gone, that life is just a small part of the larger universe that we only get to see for a split second, for a heartbeat, and then we're gone. That, like we are part of the universe, we are in ourselves universes. We contain multitudes, as the film says repeatedly.
Everything you see, everything you know.
It's a whole universe inside the minds of each and every person in the world. You shouldn't think of what happens when you die, when that universe ends. You should think of everything that makes up that universe, or the parts of it that make a whole, that make you. The people you love, the things you love, the multitudes of beings that remain alive, even as you drift away. That way, the film takes that dread from the first part and turns it into a hopeful idea of the meaning of life. Not that life has any particular unified meaning, not that it must amount to anything too grand to be meaningful, but that existing and enjoying your existence is enough to create a meaningful life.
That is why God made the world. Just that.
I've talked about the short story this film is based on a little, and I've mentioned the film improves upon it, but I don't mean to be unfair. The original story is good. Most of the general ideas the film explores, and even specific lines, are present verbatim in the short story, and the idea of exploring the multitudes of one's own existence by making their own mind be a literal universe that dies when they die is really smart. But Stephen King's writing of the life of Chuck, at points, feels less cohesive than the film. In the introduction of the Life of Chuck book, Stephen King talks about how he came up with the idea for this story, that he thought of this idea of a universe inside a person's mind as they're dying, and he wrote that, meant to be its own short story. Then, a month later, he came up with the idea of Act 2, of a businessman stopping in the middle of the street to dance to busk drumming, unrelated to Chuck, until he had the genius idea of making it part of the same story, of making the businessman Chuck Krantz, months before his death, stopping to dance. After that, he came up with Act 1 to tie the story together, telling the story backwards and talking about Chuck as a kid. The reason I say this is because in many ways, it feels like Stephen King never went back to edit the first part, Act 3, after coming up with the other parts of the story. They connect a little, but mostly feel incredibly disconnected beyond Chuck's name, which I assume is just because of how King came about writing the story idea. The film, however, connects all three acts in a way that makes the entire story way more meaningful. For one, and this is just a product of the medium, as it'd be way harder to do this in a written way compared to a visual medium like film, the characters who show up in Act 3 are all later revealed to have been part of Chuck's life in one way or another. His dying mind grabbed people from his past, his teachers, people from the street, and conjured up that universe that dies in the beginning of the film. It helps the story feel more cohesive, but it also helps the point of the story. The film makes a point about the influences in Chuck's life, about what makes people who they are. The fact it very clearly shows the influence his grandmother had on him with his love for dancing in Act 2 adds a lot to his character. The same way his teachers from when he was a kid being the people his mind conjures up in his dying moments shows how much his teachers mattered to him. The same is true for the words that are repeated from his childhood in Act 3.
The waiting, I think that's the hardest part.
It's the waiting, Chuck. That's the hard part.
Or how he saw on TV the idea of the cosmic calendar. It's like what Riley says in Midnight Mass.
I dream bigger than I have ever dreamed before because it's all of it. Just the last dump of DMT all at once, and my neurons are firing, and I'm seeing this firework display of memories and imagination.
I think it's so interesting to see the ideas that Life of Chuck explores present in Mike's other works, because it speaks to why he wanted to make a film about this one short story Stephen King wrote in 2020, which is that this one story spoke to him. It saw the world and life in general in a similar way he did, and he wanted to help tell that story in his way. The scene that most perfectly encapsulates Chuck's character and the general view of life the film has is one that wasn't even in the original story at all. In Act 1, the third and last part of the story, there's a conversation between Chuck and his grandpa, Albie, where Albie talks about math. He tries to impress on Chuck the idea that math isn't boring, that everything, the world, the stars, even Chuck himself, is all math. That math can even be art. He's doing this to help Chuck study, but it also has a profound impact on him as he hears Albie say,
I take those numbers, do a little art. I save someone's life.
And also decides to become an accountant when he grows up. It shows the influence his grandpa had on him, but also makes him having that job as an accountant fit so much better than in the original story. Chuck now sees accounting as something more than just boring numbers. He's able to find the good in something like that, and how he can help people with accounting, in how it can be fun, even if not as fulfilling as what he wanted to do, which was dancing. The conversation is necessary because it talks about how Albie wants Chuck to secure his future. As much as Chuck loves and is very good at dancing,
The world loves dancers. It truly does. but it needs accountants.
That ties in with Act 2, where it's said that Chuck's life at that point is narrower than it once was.
He understands that narrowing is the natural order of things.
The film is making a point about the regular person, that everyone has these worlds inside them. Chuck isn't special or unique, than amount to being a big creative, an artist, or a dancer. It would have been easy for a story like this to say that writers' minds create worlds in that sense, to focus on something creative, on the people who make art. But he's just an accountant who likes to dance. The regular person is the same, they may aspire to big things, but life usually gets in the way. Life usually gets narrower, but these people were still big and important. Everyone is. Everyone can enjoy and find meaning in their life, no matter how short their life is, or if they ever achieved their big dreams. Everyone contains multitudes. The film makes the case that everyone's lives are a collection of good things and bad things, and the good things make life worth living, and the bad, the rest, well...
The rest is confetti.
The film also adds a better reason for him delaying his dance at the school fling with Kat McCoy. He's anxious and nervous to put himself out there and almost bails on the dance altogether, but then steps out of the building and looks up at the sky and sees a shooting star. At that moment, he realizes the beauty of the world, of life, is moments like that, special memories that you carry with you until you die, even if nobody was there with you to see it. So he dances because, like the universe, which is wonderful, he's also a part of the universe, and he too is wonderful. And he doesn't have to care about what people will think of him dancing with a girl a foot taller than him, because those memories won't last, that's just confetti. But the memory of the dance, the happiness he feels doing that, will last forever.
I am wonderful. I deserve to be wonderful. And I contain multitudes.